Hey, this is Ryan Steller, and I'm with Mike Martinelli.
Hey, everyone. Happy Friday.
This is the Standard Care Briefing, and we're going to run through a set of healthcare topics that we thought were interesting this week. In the first segment, it'll just be three quick ones. McKinsey study on care moving to the home. Somebody at the NIH got money to give monkeys Red Bull, and the results were actually pretty good, which is interesting. And there's an article from Stat News about a machine learning and AI study that was retracted, and it was embarrassing for a number of folks. And then the two bigger segments we'll talk about. Merck is suing Medicare over drug pricing controls that were introduced in the IRA. And then finally, we'll talk about single-payer healthcare in California. So there's a move by Senator Weiner to bring it back, and that's a long debate. So we'll try and keep it short. So to kick it off, this McKinsey study lays out kind of an updated set of statistics on what has been a trend. I think everybody in life sciences is well aware of, but perhaps if you're in an innovation category, this might be news. Basically, healthcare is moving into the home, away from the hospital. And the headline statistic, or the headline factoid, is that $265 billion worth of care services, representing 25% of the total cost of care in Medicare fee-for-service and MA, Medicare Advantage, will shift from traditional facilities into the home by 2025. So $265 billion in the next 2 years. That seems pretty quick. But I'm not sure how much that's different than trends that have already been happening. Mike, any thoughts on that?
Nothing major aside from, a trend that we like to see, like from us as a digital health service is, and this confirms the trend that we like to see, is that the healthy patient population for the at-home care, that they're increasing in use of virtual primary care. So that's a trend that, we expected, but it's good to see it data backed. McKinsey study.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. Timely kind of update. So go check out if you're making an argument around business case for wearables, remote monitoring, that type of thing. It'll have some helpful statistics. The second story is a lot more fun. I said it was NIH, but it's actually out of India, I think. And the title of the story, first off, it's published in Science, which is an excellent journal. The title is Taurine Deficiency as a Driver of Aging. So it hits on a hot topic, which is aging, anti-aging, living longer, being more beautiful and later in life, which is something we all want. Lead author is Parminder Singh. And the takeaway here is that taurine, which is one of the key additive ingredients in Red Bull, was given to multicellular organisms, monkeys in particular, and it showed that they live longer. So I think the stat was taurine-treated mice increased, monkeys and mice, increased 10 and 12% life expectancy at 28 months. So if you drink taurine, if you drink Red Bull every day as a human, could you live an extra 10%, which would be about seven years? I don't know. That's sounds like justification for caffeine addiction. I don't know if you have any feelings against that.
I mean, taurine itself, the study is pretty cool because it says what it found taurine to do, and it taps into all these fundamental biochemical functions that we already know have an effect on aging. For example, it said telomerase deficiency. So telomeres in our DNA are the ends of if you look at DNA in a 3D sense, our DNA continues replicating as we age, and then the old, so to speak, DNA at the ends of it, which are highly methylated, you need to have it as it grows. You need to control it, and the telomerase is an enzyme that catalyzes the it cuts off those old unused parts of the ends of the DNA. So when you age, you have excess. Your telomeres are growing, and they're not being cut at as fast a rate as when you're younger. So there's cells that are old and like, like dead and dying, which is what gives the look of aging, is like, dead and poorly, poor, like low functioning cells. They're not being discarded by like the telomere. So that's just one way. There's other mechanisms that's involved with it, which is impressive too. For example, it's active in the LDL receptors in the liver, clear for cardiovascular health. It helps to clear out LDL cholesterol. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah. I think the other thing, having received Red Bull's marketing for 20 years, I did not realize taurine was a semi-essential micronutrient. So it's one of the most abundant amino acids found in organisms across the eukaryotic phyla, or whatever that means. So yeah, gotta figure out who ultimately sponsored this. It definitely feels like too convenient, but it's a fun study regardless. All right, and then Stat covered this retracted suicide risk study, and this one this is the one that was related to an NIH grant. So it was $4 million. And it went to some noteworthy institutions, but and I think part of the reason we think it got through, even though the submission had kind of dubious quality, was it was a hot topic, which was machine learning. The title, Machine Learning for Neural Representations of Suicide and Emotion, Concepts identifies suicidal youth. And this had been published in Nature Human Behavior after having been funded for almost $4 million, which is sizable for an academic study. And then it got pulled. Mike, you had read this. Do you have any thoughts on that?
So, I mean, when this study was first published, there, like all the experts in the field that were reading it for a first like read through were noting that, like, oh, this is they were using the term garbage study. And if you look at, so the reason that I think the study initially got that, NIH funding right away is because of the outcomes that it produced. It showed a very good, like a very high correlation of using machine learning to accurately predict suicidal ideation or tendency towards suicide. But the problem is like the study design. Number one, the study design, and then how they applied the machine learning to it. So they had a pool of 79 originally, and they used 17. They had 17 where I think 15 out of 17 it accurately predicted that they were, had a suicidal tendency. And then it also, the remaining, so for a total of 34, I think there's another 17, it accurately predicted as controls. So the first problem is they cherry picked the 34 out of the 79 in the pool. And then another issue that the article talked about was this term called information leaking, where that basically, this is actually a known problem with machine learning, and it's really something that has to be addressed in order for, if you're using in a study, to make that study valid. And it's called information leaking, which is basically you have to train a machine learning, like in this instance, is certain types of fMRIs, like what to be able to detect an fMRI in order to say, like, okay, that's indicator of suicide. But you have to train it, so you're feeding it what you're training it. But the problem with information leaking is that it's using its results. It can accidentally use its results to train itself. And you can see how that backward flow of information could affect the outcomes in a way that might, in this case, I think it favored the research, definitely. It's teaching itself on what to use. So
right. Yeah, the monkey see, monkey do of the algorithm performed very well because it was using the same data that it was trained on. And this relates to headline topics around ChatGPT 4, whatever, 3, whatever, ChatGPT beating the United States medical examination, because many of those answers are available on the internet, which is part of the Common Crawl data set or index of websites that ChatGPT is trained on. So it's like, does ChatGPT really make the correct medical and clinical inference to pass the USMLE, or are the questions being asked of it just very similar to ones that came up in Common Crawl, right? And I think that's I don't know the answer to that, but it seems like it's very likely a similar phenomenon. One of the things you have to be very careful with in the medical applications of AI. All right, and next up, we have a story: Medicare versus Merck, or Merck versus Medicare. And this ties into, again, affordability issues and major talking points that come up during presidential elections. So the outcome of this case will probably be in some speech or some debate somewhere. Merck is suing Medicare. Medicare is trying to negotiate drug prices, and it's on some major drugs. So sitaglipin, metformin, and not all metformin, and some others. These are marketed by Merck under the names Januvia, Janumet, Keytruda. And we looked at the number of patients, and there's well over 5 million patients taking these drugs together. So this is a major issue for many Americans. And the case has a lot of nuance in it. It is the life science and pharma establishment understandably responding to more controls from the federal government, but these controls look a little like things we see quite a bit in other countries. So, negotiating country-level tenders for the purchasing of products is very common in Europe, particularly Germany and the Nordic countries are kind of famous for it. So this case is taking a probably uniquely American spirit to a problem that exists elsewhere. Mike, do you want to break down the case a little bit? Because there's a lot of nuanced arguments being made here.
Yeah, in terms of nuance, one thing that they mentioned very briefly at the end, which I think they could have done, expanded upon more, because I think it was an important point, is the three drugs at issue here. So you have the Januvia, so the trade name Januvia, and then Junamet. The difference between them is one is just sitaglipin, and one's like a sitaglipin and metformin combo. So those are type 2 diabetes. And then the third one is your Keytruda, which is an immunotherapy. It's used to treat several types of cancers. And the thing about these three drugs that I think that the article should mention, maybe it started off with, is that these are really these drugs have great outcomes in treating diabetes type 2 by targeting A1C. The first one is a DPP4 inhibitor, and then the Keytruda has had really good outcomes as well, and it's been studied thoroughly in oncology, and it's been really having good outcomes. And because of that, that adds to Merck's claim to the value that they could have. So using that as a background, what the issue here is this is something that comes up in legislation regularly, is Medicare trying to renegotiate drug prices. So these three are an issue because they're newer drugs. Merck still has IP rights, full IP rights to them. You can't have generics yet. And so what Merck is saying, that in the Inflation Reduction Act and the Medicare negotiation provision, Merck is saying that it gives Medicare, so the federal government, too much power in enabling it to essentially establish the price of these three medications that it will pay under Medicare. And another thing important to note is that Medicare has, in terms of the population that takes these medications, almost essentially a majority market share, probably over 50%. So what Merck is alleging here, they're using two constitutional arguments to essentially get at the same point. And so the first one they make is a takings clause argument. And so they're alleging that by Medicare being able to have so much power in essentially setting the price, it violates the takings clause of the Fifth Amendment, which prohibits the government from implicitly taking ownership of private property. And the way that they're arguing this is happening is that by Medicare being able to have so much authority in setting the price of Merck's drugs, they're taking away its ownership, because they're infringing upon its private ownership, because one of the principles of private ownership is being able to set the price of your property and when you're involved in selling it. So if they're not able to set their own price, Merck is saying that by having that taken away from them, it's violating the takings clause. And then the second one is kind of an overlap argument, a First Amendment issue, saying that the government is violating the free speech or compelled speech clause of the First Amendment, which is they're basically the compelled speech here is that their Medicare's authority and being able to set the price is compelled speech. They're compelling Merck to say like, oh, this is the price of it, even though they don't want to say like that's the exact price. So that's the compelled speech angle.
Is that is that a credible argument? Would you make that argument as counsel?
The article does cite some law professors here. They mention how the takings clause argument has been untested, but I think that's a much stronger argument than the First Amendment compelled speech one. But also, I think that in order to make that compelled speech argument, you'd have a better chance of making that if you could successfully make the takings clause argument, because it would kind of piggyback off that in terms of like the logic. The Supreme Court, so they've never ruled on a takings clause one. I don't think. I think Merck could have a chance just on that one, but we don't know yet because we don't really have any case law on that yet. So this will be new ground.
Yeah, man, it's gonna be a battle. Like it's gonna be one to watch, because we're in the United States, we're still, this gets our last topic here, which is we're trying to forge a healthcare system that has certain aspects of risk pooling, collective negotiation or whatever, and then a sense of capitalism and individual choice, and I think the other thing is a robust innovation economy. One of the things that I think a lot of Americans don't realize is that the vast majority of innovation or new patents or new inventions that come from the medical device world or the pharma world are essentially paid for by Americans, and then they're sold at lower margins to the rest of the globe. And the pace of progress in overall medicine has kind of been fueled by tons and tons of money coming in from the United States. But is that fair to the American public to be subsidizing innovation for the globe? And how is that going to shift around and change? So, all right, we'll come back to that one down the line as that case gets updated. In the final segment here, we wanted to touch on a similar sounding but proverbial and bigger deal, which is single-payer healthcare. So in the United States, we have a hybrid system where if you're over 65 or if you qualify for Medicaid due to income, you can get healthcare paid for by the government. Certain states, including my own, California, have nearly universal coverage where the state will pay for policies or subsidized policies on an open exchange, the exchanges that were required under Obamacare. And for years now, decades or hundreds of years almost, but in recent memory in California, we've had a push for a universal system in just healthcare. So this is an update to that initiative or the activism around that, and it's a bill that's being submitted by I'm going to blank on his first name, Scott Wiener, and he is a progressive politician from the San Francisco Bay Area originally. He's been very progressive on increasing housing supply. He's generally, I kind of like him, but this debate is a lightning rod of an issue. And the thing I think that's important about this one that's different from what we currently have is if the bill goes through, it would force out the commercial plans. So if you have an insurance plan through your employer or that you bought on the open exchange from United or Cigna or whatever, if this bill goes through, I think it's SB 770 is the bill in California state Senate, then you would have to give up that policy, and all of the money would flow into a single risk pool, and then it would get spread out, according to standards of care decided on by committee and medical necessity and that kind of thing. Generally, centralized planning and that kind of thing. So, Mike, how do you feel? Do you think, first off, do you think we'll ever see this at the national level? And then, with regards to California in particular, do you see any reasons this wouldn't happen, either wouldn't be allowed to happen, or just it's just a bad idea?
Well, starting with at the national level, I'd say, with a more split Supreme Court, how they ruled on the ACA, which wasn't even like that version of the ACA wasn't even full blown single payer. It was like the public option one. It like barely made it by. It made it by a vote. I think it was a Roberts, and it was a tax, and it was ruled basically on the Congress's tax and spend clause. Given that history alone, I'd say we'll never see this in our lifetime at the national level. If it ever was to try to get to the national level, you'd have to have a successful state-run one first to use as a model, I would think, in order for you to ever have a chance of seeing it. So it looks like here in California, if they do succeed in passing it, it will be the first state to successfully, well, and I think it goes in implementation as well, passing it, then implementing it as a functional, program. If they do that, then it could be a model, serve as a model for other states you'd see picking back off maybe.
Yeah, we see that a lot around climate change and like solar subsidies, electric vehicle subsidies. Famously, the CARB board in vehicles and transportation in California push forward a lot of the like mileage, cafe requirements or whatever they're called decades ago. I kind of feel like this could happen. I feel like this is not just a random progressive concept or like idea. It feels like it's possible in California. I do think it would be really important in the United States to have a couple of states try, this is my personal opinion, try single payer systems. California is kind of maybe the worst one to start with because it's so big and so complex and struggles with how to use taxpayer dollars and get alignment on that. This bill would require $390 billion of incremental tax revenue per year. And that is a lot. So I was trying to figure out how many, what the population of California is. It's 39 million. So what is 390 billion divided by, so this is rounded to 40 million. That's 9,750. So you're basically going to pay 10 grand more in taxes, but everybody has the same California sponsored health plan. And I don't know, I guess it'll kind of on your pay stub, it'll just be shifting the dollars over from your healthcare benefit, which is about $400 to $500 per person in my experience here, over to the California tax line. And I don't know. Any thoughts, Mike?
Yeah, it's like, so was it like 40 million you said California residents?
So the tax base
change is less than that. 39 change. So the tax base, I'd say, is probably maybe like 60% of that, maybe, or 65.
Oh, I don't know. Oh, so you're saying the per capita cost might be higher?
Yeah, like people below a certain income are not going to be paying like I'm pretty sure California does have their state taxes like graduated level, like the federal, has tax brackets. Some state, like I know New York and New Jersey have tax brackets that are graduate. I'm pretty sure California does too. So there's going to be a certain percentage of people at the lowest bracket who are not going to be paying any income taxes. So that means that like the tax burden is going to be shifted to a smaller number of residents.
Okay, so instead of the 9,700 for people who actually pay, it'll be something higher, like 13,000 or 14,000 per year to cover that incremental 390 billion.
Yeah.
We're not economists. We didn't run the numbers, but yeah. Okay. We'll come back to that because that's going to be, it has been and will continue to be an ongoing saga in California. It would be interesting to see single payer experimented with at scale. But Mike, as you noted, the likelihood of it happening at a national level with federal imposition would violate states' rights, correct?
Yeah, like that's a general like theme that it like in effect it will. I mean, not on its face. That's like what you would have as the argument. But not even like getting to the making a constitutional argument, just looking at, I mean, this is still constitutional, the federal system, like this, that's really what differentiates us from democratic countries. So democracies in say Europe or the Nordic countries is that's a fundamental difference between parliamentary systems and then our system is we have much more of a vertically integrated, like there's really like, there's a federal government that has its rights, it's the powers, and the states' rights, like the powers that states have is very like important in that it's very protected by our Supreme Court. And you don't have that degree of vertical integration in the European democracies and Nordic countries.
Yeah. All right. So we'll come back to that. All right. I think that's it for today. Thank you all for tuning in. We had, this is episode 3, by the way. We had a lot more views than we anticipated on episode 2. So still a small audience, but we're appreciative for anybody who watches, and we look forward to chatting with you again later. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
See you.